Today's reading is an excerpt from a sermon by the Reverend John Haynes Holmes, delivered in 1915, and the title was A Statement to My People on the Eve of War. Holmes said, "On the morning of Sunday, March 7th, 1915, I declared in this church my absolute and unalterable opposition to war. War, I said, is never justifiable at any time or under any circumstances. No man is wise enough, no nation is important enough to justify the wholesale destruction and murder which constitute the essence of war. War is hate, and hate has no place within the human heart." Thank you. "War is death, and death has no place in the realm of life. War is hell, and hell has no place in the human order, no more place in the human order than in the divine." I then asked what this means in the practical terms today, and I answered, it means not only that war is unjustifiable in general, it means that this war, which may in the folly of men come to America tomorrow, is unjustifiable for Americans. Here ends the morning's reading.
Hello again, everyone. I'm going to take off my mask. Okay, great. I got a thumbs up from Sandy. That means I can go. Hello again. My name is Errol. And for those who don't know, I am also a student at Union Theological Seminary, Seminary's Divinity program. And I first want to thank Reverend Peggy, Reverend Chris, Reverend Jude, and all the ministers who have supported me throughout my journey into ministerial formation. I also want to give a special thank you to you, the congregation of the Community Church of New York. How's this? Better? For helping me and supporting my work throughout my time here. In one way, shape, or form, you've given me a gift, and it has helped me grow. And I'm so grateful for your love. And I have to admit, I've fallen in love with this church. For the people who are close to me, the quickest assumption to make would be it was because of the legacy of the former senior minister here, Reverend John Haynes Holmes, which I've studied on my own, but he actually came later into the picture in my personal exploration of the community church's history. The man that opened the door for me is a man named Dr. John Herman Randall, and the year was 1919, and World War I was drawing to a close. And Dr. Randall preached a sermon in 1920 called "Should America Disarm Now?" In it, Dr. Randall preached a sermon. Dr. Randall talked about the League of Nations and how the covenant of the League of Nations provided a commission to deal with disarmament. At the first meeting of the League Assembly in Geneva in the fall of 1919, Mr. Branting, then the Prime Minister of Sweden and the chairman of this particular commission, urged upon the Assembly the immediate steps towards international disarmament. And the Supreme Council of the League of Nations, being made of imperialist powers, denied it. They refused. They were made up of Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan, citing the reason the time was not yet ripe. In his sermon, Dr. Randall pulled back the curtain of the real reason why disarmament was taken off the table, and it was for profit. He began to itemize the cost of war, bringing dollar figures to the front of our consciousness, how lucrative arms sales became, how powerful dynamics shifted, revealing who had the bigger and better naval fleet, who had the strongest military, and with that power came control and a total disregard for those who suffered in the process. The sermon itself goes on to explore the destructive nature of war, and then there is this noticeable break in the flow of these thoughts. He begins to talk about the nature of science And he says, science, we have been taught, man is to conquer disease and obliterate poverty, and even destroy war. In a word, science is the greatest constructive force, which is to enable man to reach the far-lying heights of his ideals for the world. But the thing that we have learned of late is that science may become the greatest destructive force in human life, just as easily as it may be employed for constructive purposes. The fault is not in science as such, but in men who use the powerful knowledge that science discloses. And science in itself is neither moral or immoral. It is unmoral. What gives it either a moral or immoral value depends solely on the men who employ it. Now, I share this story with you because it is a reminder that we have agency in the world, that we are not bound by what came before us, but we can shape and mold the world around us to be better. Just as easily as science can be used for destruction, it can be used for good. We can say the same thing about religion. We can say the same thing about art. We can say the same thing about a Facebook post or an Instagram story, a written article in the Times. We deploy seemingly unmoral things to work in moral ways. Reverend John Haynes Holmes, the former minister here at a community church of New York, openly condemned war and all of its trappings. In the sermon by Reverend John Haynes Holmes called War Literature, Novels, Plays, Histories, Poems, and What Do They Teach?, delivered in 1930, he spoke about how war was romanticized, how poetry and creative writing depicted epic battles between good and evil, and how war was necessary to conquer evil. He conceded that he was unable to fit all of the war literature in the context of his sermon, but he is able to summarize that war literature, plays, works of art are shallow and depict very little truth of war. Instead, what he turned to was the testimony of soldiers. And he said, if there is any hope in our time for the future of the human race, if there is any reason to believe that war will someday be destroyed and peace established in the earth, I find it in the fact that men today, who have come home from the business of fighting for their country, not to glorify what they have done, not even to defend it or justify it, but to tell the truth of it, thus exposing the vast illusion and a tragic joke of war. So why is this important today? The United States has been at war for the absolute majority of my life, and continues to be at war. Whether you see it in the news or not, the final evacuation in Afghanistan occurred just last year in 2021, concluding a nearly 20-year war, the aftermath of which is still being calculated. The war on ISIS is continuing to this day, and the United States is functioning as a world police to exact its brand of justice, regardless of who it hurts. Instead of perceiving war as a country versus another country, let us approach war from a different angle. Between those who stand to benefit from war, who profit from war, and those who suffer the most from war, those who stand to lose the most from war. War is the battleground between people who live in poverty and the elite. The war is between those who are in control and the ones who are powerless. Reverend Holmes, Dr. Randall, the congregation of the community clearly recognized this from the beginning. Public debates, forums, publications, actions arose from community church in response to draw attention to this problem. They labeled the narrative of war as immoral, as wrong, as an insult to human life. They were engaged in prophetic work. And that is where they derived their power, through the actions they took to oppose war. They recognized their socio-political, economical, and human resources, their labor, and they put it to work. And you may think that this is a product of a different time, and that it's so distant that it has no relevance today, but I urge you to reconsider. This is the truth of the anti-war legacy of Community Church, and it belongs to you. It belongs to all Unitarian Universalists. It belongs to the tradition of pacifism and nonviolence common to various Christian denominations and faith traditions. This tradition sheltered people from drafts by creating the conscientious objector status, which enables people who do not believe in war the ability not to participate in war. The ancestors of this church and many religious communities who believe in nonviolence would be shocked to learn the loosening gun restrictions of our country and the state-sanctioned violence against our sisters who seek reproductive justice. Whether you are in the classroom, on the pulpit, whether you are an artist or a business person, remember the privilege granted to you by society. Your white privilege, your male privilege, your economic privilege, your straight, able-bodied, educated privilege, and galvanize it as a sword against the oppressor and a shield for the oppressed. Draw power from this moment and know that history affirms your ability to be prophetic in times of war. And that is how we do battle where we stand. Amen and blessed be.